Hi everyone. So today we are going to look at John Lennon's post-Beatles career, okay, and what marked some of the striking innovations in music, okay, um, that he performed um, alongside his work with the Plastic Ono band, okay. So that is what we are going to explore today. We are going to focus mainly on avant-garde experimentation and political activism, and then we are going to look at um, approaches to confessional songwriting, which kind of characterized um, his album. Mm, One second. Mm, which kind of appears on the first major studio album of John Lennon, performed with the Plastic Ono band. So that is something we will focus on later on. But right now we are going to look at the avant-garde experimentations and confessional song and political activism. So I'm just going to share the screen. Okay. So, John Lennon's post Beatles career was marked by a sudden prominent avant garde musical experimentation. Okay, one second. Okay, well, isn't around that. What is it going on with my Finally. Mm, okay, so it was marked by a period of confessional um It was marked by a period of, collaborative pop craftsmanship. Okay, that had earlier defined the 1980s, but with gradual evolution of his style, marked a uh, radically politicized artistic identity. Okay, and his musical collaboration with the Plastic Ono band with Yoko Ono, his wife, functioned less as a conventional band and more as a fluid conceptual vehicle for political expression. Okay, so that is important to highlight. And so let's look at what the break from the Beatles uh, brought about. Okay. The late 1960s saw increasing tension within the Beatles. For Lennon, the band had become a creative constraint and an emotional burden because his partnership with Paul McCartney had become constrained. Okay, because they had all they had all grown so much individually as artists that and they were all kind of writing so many different songs, with Ringo Starr writing his own songs and George Harrison writing his own songs, that it became difficult to kind of sustain the earlier entropy within which the Beatles had worked. Okay, so that was one of the reasons why their partnership had grown strained, and obviously, both of their personal lives had been radically transformed by their relationships with their respective partners. So, the breakup of the Beatles in 1970 functioned as a moment of personal crisis for both of these artists, and as well as a moment of creative liberation. So let's look at avant-garde foundations, the influence of Yoko Ono. So Yoko Ono was a professional, classically trained piano player. Okay. Um, Lennon's reinvention of himself cannot be understood without, looking at the influence of Yoko Ono. So she was already an established figure in avant-garde art, okay, and was associated with experimental performances. Through Ono, Lennon encountered conceptual art, non-traditional sound practices, and performance as political expression. So if you just kind of listen to their, recordings, okay, you would find that Yoko Ono has a very distinctive way of using her voice. Okay, the voice kind of teeters at the very edge of the melodic. Okay, it's a scream, it's a protest call, um, it's an unsettling of one's senses. Okay, so all of those things are kind of brought into play in her experimental performances, which was then joined with Lennon's politically charged musical compositions. So for example, right, so if you look at the Cambridge 1969 performance, okay, I'm not sure if you would be able to. Okay, so just look at the way in which she uses her voice. So it's the sound. It's a sound that would come from, from the tuning of an instrument. Okay, you hold one particular note and you keep tuning it in order to kind of achieve, in order to arrive at that perfect note. So that is the immediate sound, um immediate sensorial registration of that particular experimentation. And but then as the song as the as the composition progresses, okay, as far from as far from a melodic expression as you would imagine, it is a very, it kind of modulates itself into a form of howling, okay, which kind of critically examines what's the limit of what's the limit of um conventional notes in sounds in songs, and what are the meanings that they convey. Okay, so a howling does not necessarily kind of fit into a particular um, musical genre, if you like. Okay, and yet that is used in order to kind of speak about material tuning practices. It's kind of made to examine what are the limits, what are the semantic limits of melodic tones. Okay, what are the how can the sign system within a musical composition, how can that sound system within sign system within a musical composition be kind of deconstructed through the incorporation of a voice, okay, that mimics howling. Okay, so I will actually link it in the in the description box. But largely, what I wanted to draw attention is particularly that, okay, kind of mimicking material sound production practices, kind of asking how the how what are the emotional registers that are opened up through the incorporation of howling in the composition. And thirdly, how do the conventional sign systems associated with a musical composition necessarily deconstruct themselves through such an experimental performance. So that is that's one of the defining qualities of the Plastic Ono band's experiments. And then you have that you have them kind of focusing on shock strategy, okay, kind of like really like unsettling the audience, okay, and pushing them to the brinks of their emotional capacities, okay, by listening to a song. And that's also certainly part of their political project, okay, to kind of unsettle the comfortable veneers that society has imposed on us, all right, through repeated purchases, through repeated mundane conversations, okay, banalities that our lives could very well do without. So anyway, that is very significant. So what they focused on was the creation of an abstract soundscape, okay, and kind of movement beyond conventional musical structures. And you find that is that reflected in musical compositions such as two versions, okay. So that is also important to take note of. So the Plastic Ono Band was formed in 1969, and it was not a fixed group but a conceptual framework. Okay, its lineup changed frequently, emphasizing flexibility over stability. Okay, so important to highlight it. Okay. What were the key characteristics of such a sound production? Okay, so you had minimal instrumentation. In that particular recording, you have the howling accompanied by Lennon's guitar, and that's it. You have an emphasis on the raw texture of sound itself rather than kind of looking at harmonies, okay, and a certain integration of performance art into musical recordings, okay. So all of that kind of is important for understanding their avant-garde experimentations. And the name itself, Plastic Ono Band, the name itself suggests a kind of suggests a tension between the artificiality, okay, the artificiality um, of any the artificiality of any kind of creative act, okay, because a creative act is certainly in many ways removed from reality, okay, and in that sense it is artificial. But layered alongside that meaning, you also have a certain deliberate distance from mimicking reality. Okay, so a deliberate distance from mimicking reality, a movement towards abstractness. So that's also the second meaning of artificiality that is associated with such a performance. And you also have, an emphasis on the impermanence of creativity. Okay, so those those ideas and the conflict between them are highlighted in these particular performances. And plastic suddenly becomes a symbol of the constructed nature of identity itself. Okay, so significant to take all of it into account. Right, so the Plastic Ono Band embodied a fluid experimental approach to music making, okay, as evident um, through their, you know, through their pushing at the very boundaries of of the emotional and semantic components of a song. So that is very significant to take note of. Now, we will look at minimalism as an aesthetic and an ethical choice. Okay, so we have looked at how minimalism and the development of the miniature melodic fragment was significant for Paul McCartney. Okay, in the case of Lennon and Plastic Ono Band, you also have a similar kind of stress on minimalism, but in this case, the minimalism kind of contributes to a very unconventional abstract sound. Okay, it uses sparse instrumentation with piano, bass, and drums coming in, but kind of maintaining their aloofness from influencing the emotional impact of the song, which would necessarily be individual and proper to each of the audience members. Okay, because it's not following a defined sonic palette, if you like. Okay, so that is important to highlight it. And that is what kind of qualifies the avant-garde style of the music. Okay, right. So if we kind of look at how that transition was made possible from avant-garde experimentation to a very direct political activism, we would have to kind of look at his later songs. Okay, John Lennon's later songs. So music as protest, the anti-war movement. You have his creative and political opposition to the Vietnam War coming out in a song such as Give Peace a Chance. Okay. So, recorded during a bed-in protest with Yoko Ono in Montreal, okay, where, the entire, like the press and media and, fans, they were all kind of welcomed into their apartment to kind of be a part of John Lennon and Yoko Ono's honeymoon, all right. The song became an anthem of the anti-war movement. All right, so it was recorded in those particular circumstances, and it immediately became an anthem for the anti-war movement, a protest against America's war against Vietnam. Okay, so right, so it blurred the lines between song and protest. It encouraged audience members to be involved in the semantic sensibility of a song. Okay, what the song means would differ from one audience member to the other. So that was prioritized, and certainly it functioned as a tool for political mobilization. Okay, the song's accessibility is key to its impact. It can be sung by anyone, anywhere, all right, and carried with the performer from place to place, and kind of necessarily be able to ignite an entire history of protest songs through its very performance. So that is very significant to highlight. Lennon, by kind of directing himself towards direct political action, began to redefine his artistic identity, moving away from commercial success to focus on personal expression and political messages in his music. Okay. Right. So then you have right. So then you have performance as political action. Okay, so John Lennon's activism extended beyond songwriting into performance. Okay, as the example that I gave you, the beds in protest was part of it. Public demonstrations were also staged in hotel rooms. Media events were delegated to attract attention. Okay. There were three prominent kinds of performances. There were three prominent kind of performance styles. Okay, with one which combined art and activism, second which challenged traditional forms of protest, and third which used which used the Beatles' celebrity as a platform for political messaging. Okay, so important to highlight all of it. By the early 1970s, Lennon's political concerns had broadened to include domestic issues in the United States. Okay, so again, domestic issues, as in issues that were central politically to the national climate of the United States. Okay, so for example, you have him writing Attica State in 1971. Okay, which was written in response to the Attica prison uprising of 1971. Okay, which was a response to police brutality in the Attica prison. All right, which killed around 43 protesters, 43 imprisoned protesters, which was very, very tragic. So the song addresses institutional violence, it addresses social injustice, it addresses the unquestioned impunity that state power possesses, okay, how it can harm lives, end lives almost without any amount of, yeah, yeah, how it can harm lives, basically. So I'm just going to play Attica State. I'm not sure if any of these songs are, if you'll be able to hear any of these songs. All right, so that is your Attica State song. I will link it. I'll try to link it in the description box. Otherwise, you can kind of look for the songs yourself on YouTube. And the thing is, the beat is up, very aggressive. Okay, it has very direct slogan-like lyrics. Okay, um, it calls for accountability. All right. It demonstrates Lenin's willingness to engage with controversial topics. Okay. It extends his activism, certainly. So that is very significant to consider. Then you also have the tension between art and propaganda. Okay, which comes across in these particular songs. Okay, the tension between art and propaganda. So Lennon's political songs raise questions about the relationship between authentic artistic expression and direct political messaging, because once an art form becomes appropriated for political purposes, okay, its authenticity and autonomy as an artistic creation kind of reduces. Okay, so obviously, if when you are using art as propaganda, that question of art's autonomy comes into play. And suddenly you find that John Lennon particularly was kind of looking for ways of engaging with political critique while maintaining the while maintaining the uniqueness of sound, okay, of certain complex compositions. Okay, so another one is Give Me Some Truth. I'm not sure if any of these will be audible. Right. Right. So that is again a very definitive, that's a very definitive performance where art is used as propaganda. Okay, but um which does not kind of reduce the complexity of the composition. So that is very significant to take into account. Okay, so John Lennon's role in kind of developing protest music as an art form is a very important kind of consideration in in our study. So, what does he make use of? He's suddenly making use of simple chord progressions, repetitive structures, an emphasis on rhythm and chant, but somehow combining them in such a manner that it calls for a certain um, purposiveness of artistic consumption. Okay, so that is very significant to highlight. You're not simply listening, but you are actively participating and you are actively kind of channeling the political emotions that are present in the song. So that is very significant to highlight. And then obviously, with the beds in protest, okay, with Yoko Ono and, that kind of develops the political partnership. You find that in Attica State as well. So that all of that is very significant to take note of. And certainly it redefines the concept of artistic collaboration. Okay. So again, just to kind of conclude, I'll just share the screen once more. Mhm, mhm. Right. So right. So you find that, he's actually kind of carrying over the same principles of Beatles music, but kind of using it in a different manner altogether. So we have looked at how the collage form was an integral part to Paul McCartney's later creations. It's certainly the case in John Lennon's creations as well. Okay, it helps develop unconventional song structures, which becomes characteristic of songs such as Revolution 9. Okay, and so it challenges the readers to engage in new forms of auditory experience. He's obviously developing innovative techniques, bringing together unconventional instruments such as the electric sitar, which is exemplified in songs such as, Cold Turkey and Instant Karma. Okay, so that is also important to highlight. Again, with Yoko Ono, with the example that I'd given you with their Cambridge 1969 performance, there was, an incorporation of avant-garde elements to kind of really push at the semantic limits of a musical composition. What kind of meanings can be associated with a song that defies any form of conventional melodic uh, constraints, if you like. Okay, it's kind of pushing at those very boundaries. So all of that is very significant, and yeah, and so it goes on to kind of shape protest music. It goes on to shape genres such as punk and electronic music. Okay, and certainly calls for a greater awareness of radical artistic freedom. Okay, so thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all for our next lecture.